Hello, this is James Bradley, Bay of Plenty, New Zealand. Today we get to talk with a great buddy, Jeff J. Brown. Folks, you'll hear a little clicking in the interview, and it's because Jeff is in France and he's going through an ADSL line. I mean, it's hard to believe, but he's in Normandy, France, and the best quality. This is the second time we've tried this interview. So there'll be a little clicking, but Jeff is brilliant and he has a lot to say. Jeff has a huge audience around the world. Jeff J. Brown, you can Google him. Jeff J. Brown, China Rising. If you're one of the millions of people who don't know Jeff Brown, take a listen to this interview and see what you think. Jeff lived in China for over 16 years. He's lived there, worked there, broadcast from there, wrote there, hitchhiked all over China. Jeff J. Brown grew up in the heartland of the United States, Oklahoma, on a family farm, and graduated from Oklahoma State University. He went to Brazil when he was in graduate school at Purdue University, and this whetted his appetite for traveling the globe. Then he became a Peace Corps volunteer in 1980 in Tunisia. Since then, he's lived all around the world, Africa, Middle East, United States, China, Europe. Jeff J. Brown is fluent in Portuguese, Arabic, French, and Mandarin. He's been to over 85 countries. And I'm so happy to have Jeff J. Brown. He's coming up on the line in a second. So he's a global guy, and we're going to discuss global trends. And the first trend that I'd like to bring up with Jeff is war with China, ? Now, listeners know that we interviewed Michael Clare, who said that the U.S. national security state, the civilian leaders above the Pentagon, have decided that at some point the United States will fight China. Listeners know that John Pilger, the documentarian who did the documentary that's on YouTube, The Coming War with China, illustrates how China is surrounded by American bases. Right now, we're working on an interview. We're producing it with the great Gareth Porter. And he told us that the Rand Corporation, the egghead military thinking, I mean, the Pentagon Papers were taken from the Rand Corporation. Daniel Ellsberg worked for the Rand Corporation. He was one of McNamara's eggheads. Today, the Rand Corporation, or recently the Rand Corporation, told the Pentagon that, gee, you gave us millions and millions of dollars to study how we could beat China. And every time we do it, we come up with the answer, you can't beat China. This is about a 2,000-year-old answer. You can't conquer China. But the United States military, instead of, looking at it and saying, well, Rand says we can't beat China, has shifted gears and is going to spend trillions of dollars with the same companies that have not been able to come up with a solution so far to figure out how to have war with China. So historically, I mean, that's Gareth Porter talking, not me. So it sounds crazy to me, war with China. Ray McGovern, a elderly man who I admire, former CIA briefer to President George Herbert Walker Bush. Ray McGovern said, James, keep it simple, follow the money. He said when Obama pivoted to Asia, or announced the U.S. military pivot to Asia, there were champagne corks going off in the offices of Raytheon, Lockheed, military contractors all over the place. This was wonderful. War with China, biggest country in the world, trillions and trillions of dollars. So we're gonna cut to Jeff now, and his first words will be Mao. I'm re-recording this introduction I just gave you because of some snafus. But let's pick up with Jeff. We're talking about historical conflicts, and he begins with Mao. Welcome, Jeff Brown.
Mao Zedong, they used it as a way to tarnish Mao Zedong, but he said the same thing. He said, if the United States wants to destroy China with atomic bombs, they can go ahead and try, but we'll just move all of our people to the West, and when they get finished, we'll still have half our people left. And so there is that idea that to try to conquer China is absolute lunacy. I would also like to point out that the United States has already lost to China directly once during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. Mao put it off until the very last. He did not want to go to war, but when Douglas MacArthur got up to the Yalu River on the border, he had no choice and sent over a million troops and over a couple of years and whipped the United States. Mao also was instrumental in arming the Viet Cong in Vietnam, and without the China providing the Viet Cong with intelligence and with arms, it would have been very difficult for Ho Chi Minh to have been victorious. So the United States has had a very bad record against the United States.
Jeff,
yeah.
Can I interrupt you? Can I add one?
Yeah.
We gave Chiang Kai-shek more money than we spent on the atom bomb. Chiang Kai-shek bombed Mao's forces with U.S. planes. I mean, we should have learned something then.
Absolutely. Well, and go ahead, keep going.
No, and then we jump into your Korea. I mean, how many? Sir, whatever his name, McCartney, the first British consul who went up to see the emperor and try to make a deal and everything. He, on his way back out of Beijing, he wrote in his journals, no Western country could ever deal with China. There's just too many people. And I want to amplify that quote that you did of Mao's. Mao was confronted by other leadership folks. Hey, the United States will, drop the atom bomb. What are we going to do? And Mao said what Jeff said. The United States can rearrange some dirt on some Chinese farms, but there are just so many people and so much strength, and it's so vast. The Japanese tried it. They had a great military that could grind through my dad fought the Japanese military. It was a tough fight. A lot of those soldiers had been stationed in China, but conquer China? Who can do this? Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to amplify the point that there's a history of this not working.
And also I forgot, James, there's the third one is that after the Chinese defeated the Japanese in the Civil War from 1945 to 1949, there were 100,000 U.S. Marines in China fighting against the communists with Chiang Kai-shek. They were also using lots of leftover Japanese forces. The Americans were sending in the equivalent of today billions of dollars of airplanes, artillery, tanks, everything, and they still lost against the Red Army as they fanned down to the south.
So I to button that up, I just the sentence I used to really drive it home is we gave that effort more money than we gave the atom bomb. We gave Chiang Kai-shek the effort to defeat Mao, and we can go into strategy. I mean, Mao and Ho Chi Minh were smoking cigarettes, and Mao said, you build this back base, and the back base is inaccessible, and then you build your community, 20 people, 200 people, 2,000 people, and you don't try to take the cities. And so we can talk for hours about the strategy. But Ho Chi Minh, as soon as the French said, after World War II, hey, we're coming back, Ho Chi Minh just packed his satchel and went up to a base in the mountains.
In the mountains, yeah.
But I was in Laos, and the Laos communists bored into northern mountains, and I went in there, and there's highways in there where trucks can move in 2-lane highways. The theater seated over 2,000 people. It was a stone theater. They had no chairs, and the Americans were dropping bombs. There would be troops, from Vietnam entertaining the Laotians in this mountain theater, and they'd be watching exploding American bombs outside. You couldn't go outside; you get killed. So they lived inside the mountain, about 5,000 people, and then as soon as the Americans left, they walk out and took over the country. So they did this in Vietnam. I mean, it's a very successful strategy. The Chinese know how to do. You can't, who's going to try to conquer Vietnam again? The Ho Chi Minh Trail is there, ready to be reignited, and the invader will lose again.
And all the tunnels. Well, and not to mention that, but the other thing that's so crazy about all this is that China doesn't have to leave their borders. They only have to defend them. The United States would have supply lines all the way from California to Hawaii to Guam to Japan to try to attack, to try to even invade China. I mean, and here's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that even if you discount China's Navy, which is bigger now in their area, which is bigger than what the United States has, they have their military equipment now is so sophisticated. Xi Jinping, when he became president in 2012, 2013, he said, we will never build anything again that is not bigger, better, faster, and cheaper than what the United States is doing. And that's exactly what's happening. I mean, in terms of missiles and naval killers, ship killers, and drones, and jets, and jet airplanes, and it's lunacy. But as you said, it all gets back to the money. I mean, Ray McGovern made a very good point. I mean, this is, they come up with these monstrous, absurd, war plans because it enriches the military-industrial complex, and it not only enriches the military-industrial, the preferred stock and A shareholders of these corporations, and the CEO and the boards of directors, and all the officers who are getting all these stock options and bonuses and everything else, but it's also enriching the all across the United States. Every congressional district in the United States has at least one, and many of them have many more, have at least one military installation. So they spread this around all over the United States. So
can I stop you for a second there?
Yeah, sure.
And tell a story. I don't mean to
interrupt. I'd love it. No, I love it.
Continue your thought, but I wanted to amplify. Can you just say the every county word line? Can you repeat that?
Every congressional district in the United States has at least one military installation.
Okay, so that's, if I was running the military, I would do that too. They learn that, in Vietnam, spread out the largesse so that you get more supporters, you have more employees. I mean, it's a strategy, right? That's been going on. I went to the State Department to argue against a particular military move at a particular time, and I knew someone right under the Secretary of State, and he was an old friend, and I made my case, and he looked at me. I mean, he was a friend, so I guess he didn't want to look at me like I was a complete dope. But he said, James, it's illegal for the State Department to go lobby for stuff within the United States. He said, why don't you just go get 150 million Americans who want peace and write to the State Department demanding it, and then we will respond. He said there's 4 military people marching the flag in every single Rotary meeting in the United States every day. And he said the State Department can't be there. So you get us the mandate, and we'll get you the peace.
I just had a wonderful interview with Dr. Joan Roloffs from Keene State College in New Hampshire, and she's done her resume, her CV makes mine look like a short order cook's menu for French fries, and she's written a lot of books and a lot of papers, and she's done a tremendous amount of research into the military-industrial complex in the United States, of course, that Eisenhower warned us about. And she said, there is no way that the United States economy can ever have peace, because the Department of Defense, which I like to call the Department of Death and Destruction, but the Department of Defense is embedded in our economy like termites in wood. She said they have every foundation, they have every NGO, they're in the media. The Department of Defense has 1,200 magazine titles that they publish all over the world. They are in the media, they are in entertainment, they're in Hollywood, they're in New York. They're in Detroit and Chicago in the music business. They are absolutely, they control, maybe control. They are there in every aspect of the U.S. economy, sports especially, entertainment, movies, radio. As you said, the four, Marines, the ROTC, the ROTC Marines, who, and the Marines,
Army and Navy, and the four. But Jeff, so this is a huge subject, and I think we really, we've almost not said any opinions. We told stories, we've been pretty factual so far. I want to switch and ask you to do something difficult. So let's say this conversation is heard by a number of your friends, acquaintances, media people in China. How do they view this string of facts? Number one, China's beaten America and every invader forever. Number two, China's too big to eat. Number three, China could sink all our aircraft carriers within 30 minutes. Guam would be gone. I mean, but the United States military is still preparing for war. There's a lot of money in preparing for war. War is embedded in the U.S. economy. So those are some facts. And, I don't think you can argue with that. Chiang Kai-shek, you can see the amount of money we sent them. You can see how much we spent on the atom bomb. But how does China see these facts? What we have just talked about so far? They must have media saying this. They must have this information. What? Of course,
as you famously said, when you were on my show one time, that the American media, mainstream media, is government managed. The Chinese, everybody needs to know the media in China is government owned and managed, and they do that for social stability, economic prosperity, and to maintain peace and harmony in the country, and to also protect their borders and prevent stuff like that happened in Ukraine and Hong Kong, color revolution kind of stuff. And so it is government managed, and they are very careful. The Chinese, you can go back to the Republican era in 1911 and back during that period, and as soon as the Opium Wars hit in 1839, when the British, humiliated the Chinese, they are very proud, they're very nationalistic, and they're very patriotic. And this has been going on for a long time, at least since the Opium War, the first Opium War. So the government is very, very careful. They're very nuanced about they do not want to whip up nationalist, too much nationalist fervor, because they don't want the people to start, attacking McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chickens and that kind of stuff. But the Chinese, I mean, I've talked to them. They are very, very, very aware of the opium wars, the century of humiliation. They are very. When I talk to China, of course, I speak, read, and write Chinese, and so when I'm talking to them, I'm going, yeah, Obama and Trump and whatever, yeah, they think they can beat China, and they always say it'll never happen, impossible. And so they do know that the Americans are at least geostrategically the enemy. And I have always said this, James. I have always said that half the people in China like Deng Xiaoping's reforms and opening up. It's mostly the city people, less so the rural people, but 95% of the Chinese, no questions asked, follow Mao Zedong's geopolitical outlook, and that is down with imperialism, down with global capitalism. And they really feel strongly about that. And since the United States is the brand name for that, they're very aware of it. But at the same time, they're very confused. That's sort of the Mao. That's the Mao.
Okay, can I stop you there? You there? Because so those isms, we can get confused and then say, oh, Mao said, I hate America. No, it's imperialism. I know. I'm saying, let's sort this out. Mao's saying, let's talk to each other, but when you jump into my country or on other countries, that's imperialistic. And China doesn't go around the world to, invade Argentina. I mean, but you're laughing, but that's how far the U.S., the China-U.S. conflict is not in San Francisco Bay, Chesapeake Bay. Chinese aren't coming in from Toronto. It's us spending trillions of dollars to project a line of defense and a line of offense encircling China. That's very expensive. What was the point I was trying to get to?
I do want to point out that even though they fiercely adopt Mao's anti-imperialism and anti-global capitalism, they are also very Confucian, and they're also very Taoist. That they're very patient. The big wheel of life keeps on turning. They overlook a lot of things. In fact, if you don't speak fluent Chinese and you don't get a couple of drinks and get a couple of shots of Mao Tai in them, it's hard to get them to say anything negative about the United States or Europe. There's this strong sense of not wanting for you to lose face is extremely powerful.
Yeah, and so, I didn't mean, how did the Chinese criticize America? What I meant was, let's look at a map. There's Guam, the United States reinforcing it. China now has a bullet that they can fire that would incinerate Guam. What are they thinking about? I guess what I'm saying is, China realistically can look at this as a fool's errand. They also see the United States preparing a fool's errand. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
How do they see that? I mean, how do they explain that to themselves?
The Chinese, Xi, at least once a year, he always goes on. He always visits. He is actually a People's Liberation Army officer. He was an officer before, way back in the 80s, and his wife too. So he's a military guy, and he understands.
He told a friend that he loved the movie Flags of Our Fathers.
All right.
So he's a military guy. But continue.
But anyway, he just 2 or 3 weeks ago. This was for the anniversary of the victory, and it was the date when the Chinese flooded over the Yalu River and turned Douglas MacArthur around. And he always says when he has these big military meetings, the People's Liberation Army must be prepared for war. You need to be preparing for war. You need to be ready to fight. You need to be ready to defend our country. You need to be ready to defend our borders. And so this has now become regular. And Xi started saying this, of course, as soon as he became president in 2012, 2013, because of Obama's and Hillary Clinton's, ridiculous pivot to Asia. So they understand that. And I think Xi especially so, being a military guy, and they're ready. I mean, they're just obviously the Jane's report knows about all the different military gear they've got. Surely Rand and the Department of Defense and the Defense Intelligence Agency must know all the stuff that the Chinese have in terms of electromagnetic weapons, and everybody knows about their stealth jets and their drones and their missiles. Pilger, his movie was excellent. I mean, it would appear like they're going to eventually try to go to war with China, but it's just like, God, it's just like what a. At least I think it would be pretty short and sweet. I don't think it would last very long unless the United States became desperate, which they would pretty quickly, and release atomic weapons. That's the fearful aspect.
Yeah, we'd have to go nuclear. That's what everyone's concerned about. Can I interrupt here to say, if people are hearing a clicking and wondering about the sound quality, can we say that, I've been living in Vietnam, and the internet is absolutely fantastic. And China, the internet's great. South Korea, fast as a bunny. And then I'm talking to Jeff in Normandy, France. And he said something incredible to me. This is our second attempt to make a clean recording. We tried yesterday also. He said that the best connection he can get this is a Western country, it's France. You can find it on the map. And he said that the highest quality connection is ADSL. Folks, I'm sure there are people listening to this who aren't old enough to remember ADSL. I told a Vietnamese friend that you were on ADSL, and they started laughing.
It's terrible. It's the third world. It's just we're supposed to get cable fiber in the next couple of months, but this should have been taken care of 20 years ago.
So there's a little clicking, and we're aware of it. But if you continue your energy, Jeff, projecting, we can. No, it sounds good. It sounds good. But I wanted to tell the listeners that we've made efforts, but when the government of France, has something that's about 80 years old in there, copper wires, it sounds like. But anyway, let's get back to China. Now, without getting into COVID, I don't mean to avoid it. I'm just too bored, all the details. What's happening right now? And right now means next 5 years. They just had a 5-year plan. Maybe that would help organize our thinking. But how can we move from today to the next period? What do you think is going to be happening between the U.S. and China?
Well, I don't know how, of course, the to be honest with you, I think that what the Trump administration has been trying to do, and I think whether it's Biden or Trump who finally gets in the White House, I don't think it's going to really make much difference. The West simply cannot compete against China on a level playing field in the world market. And Huawei is a great example. It's really, really tough to compete against bigger, better, faster, and cheaper. And the West in general, I think we've just gotten so darn lazy after 500 years of rape and plunder and exploitation and extraction, and we've gotten lazy, and we don't want to roll up our shirt sleeves and work really hard. And the Chinese do. I mean, they're very industrious. They're very productive. They plan. This is very communist and socialist. This goes back to Lenin and Stalin and Mao. These 5-year plans, and now the Chinese have a rolling 10-year plan. And if you are a phone manufacturer in China, and in the 5-year plan they have set goals for X number of towers, or you are a hotel chain, and that the Chinese government over the next 5 years is planning on building 150,000 kilometers of highways and 25,000 kilometers of high-speed trains and 50 new airports, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can plan. The business sector can plan, because these objectives are set. So that is really, James, that is so hard to compete against. And they're very patriotic. T-Mobile or Ford or whatever, they don't care about whether they help the United States or not. These are transnational, global corporations. Chinese corporate companies, down to the mom and pop shop, up to the biggest, up to the Bank of China. And Huawei, they're very patriotic. They're very pro-China. And Xi even says in his speeches, do what, it's okay to make money, but take care of your people first. Take care of the Chinese people and take care of the Chinese nation first. That's your first priority. So, China just naturally is kind of on a war. I mean, that's like FDR. I mean, that's like a war footing. But that's just the way they are. And they have these goals. So the one that really scared the heck out of the United States was the Made in China 2025, and that is where they just made a plan, and they budget, and they provide tax incentives, and they special economic zones, and they do. I mean, it is like a well-oiled Mercedes-Benz diesel V8, and they so their goal is by 2025 is that 70% of all high-tech products must be able to be made nationally, and where they don't need to be imported. That's probably going to happen faster, because with the U.S. trying to crush their microchip access to microchips, they're going to be pushing further. It's really hard to believe that just 3 or 4 years ago, China was importing 80% of its microchips from the United States, and now they're going to be importing very, very few. Then next Xi just came out, by 2027, China will be better, bigger, better, faster, more powerful, and at the same level of the U.S. military. That's 2027. The other one that people completely ignore is that this year, by the end of this year, starting 3 years ago, Xi Jinping and the government said, we are going to eliminate extreme poverty in China by 2020, and they're going to do it. And so it'll be the first country in the world that has no extreme poverty. Now, there's still going to be some poverty, but there's not going to be extreme poverty. Then by 2035, they have what they call the Xiaokang, and Xiaokang is a Confucian concept that Mao used and Deng Xiaoping used, and it's the concept that everybody is sort of middle class. That everybody will have a middle class lifestyle. That they'll have things to buy, things to nice houses. By the way, 85% of the Chinese own their own houses, and 40% of them don't have any debt on them. So and so that's 2035, and then they have 2049, and they're planning this stuff out, James. In 2049, they want, their goal is to have arrived to where China will be able to start adopting Datong, and Datong, D-A-T-O-N-G, is the Confucian concept of harmony. Basically, it's a utopia. It's a communist utopia where everybody has food, clothing, shelter, no wants, no needs. I mean, it's basically communism, and this goes back 4,000 years. And at that point, in 2049, the Chinese are planning on transitioning from their current, market capitalist / communist socialist system to a pure communist system like Mao was trying to achieve. Except now China will be so rich and so powerful that they can do it, and everybody can be wealthy with it happening. Another thing, can I keep going, James?
Yeah, please.
The other thing is that a lot of people don't realize, the mainstream media likes to go, the second largest economy. Well, China's the second largest economy after the United States. Well, I hate to break it to everybody, but that is not true. The only way you can compare global economies is with purchasing power parities, because a kilo of meat in Switzerland costs differently than a kilo of meat in Botswana. And so you have to balance all these products and services to where they are apples to apples. And the Economist magazine, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Financial Times, everybody came out in 2014 and said that China already had the world's largest economy in 2014 on a purchasing power basis. Purchasing power parity basis. And now she just came out this week and said, we feel like we will be able to double. It's already the biggest economy in the world. And he is now saying, we feel confident that we can double the size of our economy by 2035. They're also talking about being carbon neutral, the entire freaking economy being carbon neutral by 2059 or 2069. This is China, James. This is what they do. And all American politicians can do and American corporations can do is be looking at the next quarterly report.
Well, here, Jeff, can I interrupt for a second for some contrast?
Sure. Yeah.
That I'd like to read the U.S. plan. Jeff just went through 2025, 2035, 2049. So here's the U.S. plan. Okay. Did you get the U.S. plan there, Jeff?
Well, the U.S. plan is the 24-hour propaganda cycle and the quarterly report. I mean, that's what they're looking at. That's all they do. That's all they care about is the next quarterly report.
I'd like to. Jeff just said a lot of great meat there. I can't wait to re-listen to this and take notes. But to demilitarize the discussion, most of what Jeff talked about was internal help the people. But what Americans get jangled by in the propaganda media is the military aspect of U.S. and China. It's that we see the troops marching. We don't see the mothers smiling. And and our roots in this subject are bases, like 1,000 bases around the world. And let's talk, but China has some other strong roots. And I'd like to just tell 3 quick anecdotes to demilitarize the subject. I spent 3 months in Spain last year, Airbnb around the place. And every single modem that I switched over to get on Wi-Fi was made by Huawei. Americans shouldn't be imagining. I mean, if you go up to Mount Everest, you're going to go through Huawei up there. I've been up to Mount Everest base camp. If you're going to go up to Everest, Huawei got the job. They're all over the world. They have been working. I mean, Africa. The Chinese approach to Africa was, you're Chinese, you want to make money, you want to go to Africa, go to Africa. And they have deep commercial roots into Africa, while America has barbed wire bases. We're spending money into Africa. China is Africa's biggest trading partner, and it's beneficial to both sides. I know it's not 100% clean. I know there's criticisms, but I'm speaking generally in this short podcast that China approached it commercially. And I saw this. I spent my own money, my own time to go down to Darwin, Australia. After Obama pivoted to Asia, he put the Marines into Australia. So I went down to Darwin, Australia, which is their northern port. A lot of the goods of the Australian hinterland flow up to Darwin, and they put it on a ship, and then the ship goes out and they make a lot of money. Big port. So the Americans come in military vessels, and they offload tanks and equipment. And I went out to the base. It's outside of town. They're blowing up red hills, and they're practicing for basically containing China. It's a long story. The point is, in the town of Darwin, the Chinese are walking around in business suits because they came in and said, this is a dilapidated port. Give us a 99-year lease and we'll put billions of dollars in here and you'll make a lot more money. So the Chinese control the port without a shot fired. And then the people of Darwin encountered the United States Marines as guys who come in, for a beer at night and go to a bar and then leave town, at 3 a.m. The Chinese are in the Rotary Club meetings. And they're saying things like, hey, what if we got a direct flight from Shenzhen and we put in a casino here, and then Mrs. Mary Jones on the corner here in Darwin with her muffin shop would become a millionaire. So it's just a different approach. There's different routes. It's not, so I just wanted to demilitarize the discussion and go a little global and then switch to Taiwan. And can I do a historical background on Taiwan and then let's go back to the 19th century. And I'm not arguing a side, but I am arguing that there are some historical facts here. So which book did I put this in? I think in my last 2 books, but General Legendre was a Civil War hero, United States Civil War, 1860s, and he had one eye blown out. And so he's a one-eyed General Legendre, and he gets a job as a consul in China, and he goes to China, and he's thinking militarily, and he says to the mandarins in Beijing, that Taiwan, you've got to go show that you control it. And the mandarins are like, Taiwan is under Chinese influence. Don't worry, cool your jets. No, it's a separate island and you have to militarily show that you're dominant. And he gave the Chinese a speech about Andrew Jackson flushing out Indian territory. He wanted them to go in and get rid of the Aborigines in Taiwan. And he gave as an example that Andrew Jackson had exterminated the Indians, Trail of Tears and all that, So the Chinese are like, you are crazy. And Legendre went to Taiwan. He had war plans and everything. He presents it to Beijing. And they're, the Mandarins are like, I'm sorry, you're nuts. Taiwan is part of China. Everyone in the world knows it. We don't have to, what are you talking about? So Legendre goes through Tokyo and he becomes the first foreign employee of Emperor Meiji. And Emperor Meiji and Legendre are smoking cigarettes, talking about war plans with Taiwan. And so about a year later, it's all documented in my books, about a year later, on an American ship that the Japanese bought from America, the Japanese invaded Taiwan. And that was the first tickling in Taiwan. It was like the 1870s. Now let's go to 1945. Taiwan was Japanese. If you go to Taiwan right now, the infrastructure looks Japanese. Walking around the old towns of Taiwan, it's like walking around Japan because Japan built it. They were there for many, many decades. But in 1945, they surrendered. They lost the war. And then the United States came in and then drew a bunch of lines and put a bunch of names. This is Formosa. This belongs to Chiang Kai-shek. Here's Okinawa. Here's the line. And then China's this line. And the U.S. Navy, and I'm not criticizing anybody, America was the victors. And they drew all the lines on the map. Well, the problem was that there was no China. China was in a civil war, and there was no China at the table. So now all we hear is Taiwan is a completely independent country that has been this way forever, and China is an aggressor who wants to take foreign territory. But Jeff, tell us how the Chinese just look at this as like a brother out of the ocean, Taiwan, and that no emperor in 2049. 2049 is the 100th anniversary of Mao saying, "Hey, China for China." So in 2049, that emperor, whoever he will be, is going to have Taiwan back within the family, I am told, by sources out of Beijing. So, Jeff, I'll toss it to you, Taiwan.
Well, that is, in terms, that would be the only, Macau, the Portuguese abandoned East Timor and Macau and Goa and all their, Angola and all their, Mozambique, they just fled in the 1970s, and Macau has basically been a part of China since the Portuguese left. I mean, you go to Macau and they love China, and it's basically attached at the hip. Hong Kong, of course, is its own story. Taiwan is, for the Chinese, has been a part of the Chinese nation for thousands of years. I mean, it's been inhabited by Chinese and Aborigines for going back, many years. Back to the Tang Dynasty, 600 to 900 AD and before. So for the Chinese, it's not even a discussion. I mean, it's not even a debate that Taiwan is an integral part of the motherland. And the only reason that Taiwan was not conquered or taken over by Mao and the Red Army, they got Hainan, off the coast of Vietnam.
Okay, now we're into, just for the listener, 1945, the war ends. And the United States gives Taiwan to Chiang Kai-shek. And now Jeff's talking about 1949. There's a military move he's talking about.
And so Mao was actually, they had gotten most of the islands off the coast of China from the nationalists. The U.S. Navy escorts Chiang Kai-shek to Taiwan, and the nationalists, the KMT nationalists. And this is what is so ironic about it is that Mao was in the process of planning an invasion of Taiwan to take it, and they probably would have succeeded. But guess what? A funny thing happened. The Korean War started, and that that put the kibosh on the People's Republic to take the island like they did all the other territories up and down the coast. So there's no discussion, and you are absolutely right. Your friends in Beijing are absolutely right. That is China's one red line. Is Taiwan is the red line. I can guarantee you, James, that if tomorrow the leader of China, the leader of Taiwan, what is it, Tsai Ing-wen, if she declared independence, the Chinese would overrun that island in 24 hours. There is absolutely no way that Taiwan is ever going to be able to try to be independent, because it never really was. And as you said, from the 1870s, it was controlled by Japan. So, and she has said that, and that is, and you're absolutely right, 2049, by 2049, the Taiwan must be a part of another province in mainland China. Hong Kong goes back in 2047 officially, and Macau in 2049. If it's just, but I've always joked, the Chinese don't even have to fire a bullet. 5% of the Taiwanese population live and work in China. There are so many billions and billions and billions of dollars of Taiwanese investment in China, mainland China. There's a million Taiwanese living in China. All they have to do is cancel about 10 or 20,000 key visas, send them home, send them back to Taiwan, and it'd be over. I mean, the Taiwanese economy would collapse. So the Taiwanese economy is so dependent on the mainland economy that I don't think China would really even have to fire a bullet, but they will if push comes to shove.
So the push comes to shove is that there's a big power out in those waters, the United States. So I was out in the Pacific on a vessel with a top admiral, very top admiral, and I said, Admiral, the lines that we're talking about between China and America, the Pacific, they were drawn, in good faith, but by the U.S. military when there was no China. And instead of talking about fighting about these lines, why don't we sit down, at negotiating tables and talk about these lines? And he said, if China crosses the line and the president orders me to do something, I'll do it. So, in other words, the American media is just presenting this as a total military situation. China's aggressive, wants to militarily take over Taiwan. Then the next day they're going to take over Omaha and then go on to Chicago. And there was no war regarding, Hong Kong is part of China for whatever, it's on the Chinese. Taiwan has been part of China. So this can be done peacefully. The military angle is that we are seeing that it's a military tussle, and it doesn't have to be. Deng Xiaoping did not make Margaret Thatcher get down on her knees and kiss, we can talk, we can negotiate, but facts are facts and history's history.
Well, James, but you go back to that military tussle you're talking about is what keeps the American economy afloat and keeps the military-industrial complex, being plied with, tens and hundreds, well, actually almost $1 trillion with all the atomic bombs and everything else, $1 trillion a year. So they have to have that tension. They have to have that conflict. They have to have that fear. They have to have that, the boogeyman, the communists. the Communist Party of China, Pompeo, keeps pumping away that, Xi Jinping is not the president of China. He's this general secretary of the CPC. So that kind of fear and loathing and fanning the flames of war represents literally trillions of dollars in profits for American corporations. And so it's just, I don't, other than the United States imploding and completely the U.S. empire, the Western empire completely implodes, and we somehow start over without the global banksters and the 1% oligarchs. I don't see any way out, James, other than waiting for the United States to finally implode under its own debt and hubris and I would almost say delusions.
Well, we'll leave it there. That's a lot. That's a lot to chew on. And what I'd like to ask you again, Jeff, is our listeners can read what you've written. They can delve into your books. They can hitchhike around China with you. They can get weekly podcasts on the big news items. But where should they find you, Jeff?
Well, go to www.chinarising, all one word, .punto press, PUNTOPRESS, puntopress.com, and that's my website. And then you can click on the blog link, and there's all kinds of information. That's all 10 years of blogs and videos and audio and articles my email is there. I always answer people's emails, polite or impolite, whatever I get. I always make comments. If you leave a comment on one of my articles on China Rising Radio Sinoland, I always make a comment. I always respond back. I always answer emails. I'm very engaged with my friends, fans, and followers out there. So you will not be wasting your time if you start participating. But be forewarned. A friend of mine said, Jeff, the reason I like you is because you're so fearless, and so that does upset some people sometimes. And I do have I am polemical. I do have my positions and my what I've learned for 16 years in China, and so it's not always what people want to hear. But when you read my stuff, you're reading the how the Chinese people think about themselves and the rest of the world.
All right. So Jeff, thank you for projecting your voice from France through an ADSL connection all the way across the Indian Ocean, all the way across the Pacific by New Guinea, way down to New Zealand.
All the way across Australia.
Yeah. No, went around the water between New Guinea and Australia.
There you go.
So
hey, listen. Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to it, and of course I will promote it and blast it all over Kingdom Come on China Rising Radio Sinoland, and looking forward to seeing your expert and your son's expert production for the final product.
Cool, Jeff. See you later.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our channel. New episodes premiere every Wednesday. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Untold Pacific. If you have any questions or comments, please email our producer, Jack at untoldpacific.com.